Dr. William Rosenberg is joining us, professor of political science at Drexel University. He is the co-author of News Verdicts, the Debates in Presidential Campaigns and the Politics of Disenchantment, Bush, Clinton, Perot, and the Press. He is tweeting at Dr., as in Dr. B. Rosenberg. Bill, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
I wanted to focus on something. Bill sent us some notes about things to talk about today. One of the things that I was looking at is communication. This is really up your alley. You have written that disciplines like communication might help us figuring out the best way to communicate health information and political information. We get bombarded by Chris Cuomo and CNN and President Donald Trump in different parts of the day. While some may listen, many are operating with perceptual screens, processing it all in a manner that is consistent with their pre-existing beliefs, unwilling to be challenged or consider another point of view. Polarization is the watchword of the day. It seems to me in this debate over the reopening, you have hit something very, very key here, which is that the division between people is to the point where they don't want to listen to the argument on either side that is being made in favor of or against opening more quickly or not.
Absolutely. I think that, we're largely a society now that is in different silos from a political standpoint. And this is playing out even more dramatically with regards to the pandemic. Each day we have literally hours of coverage on various cable news programs talking about the coronavirus and how dangerous it is. And I think, like candidates, this issue has sort of sunk in for a number of people in a way that is not really, pardon the pun, healthy. People are aware that they have to wash their hands. They're aware that they should have separation. They should be aware that scientists are trying to work out some type of vaccine. But there is a sizable majority that says, look, I'm just fatigued by all this, and I want to move on, and I'm just not going to listen anymore. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Wow, I've made up my mind. I wonder, and I've made this observation with some of our guests about the fact that there is no real Anthony Fauci or Deborah Birx doctors in the economics world. It's a little more imprecise. And you have pointed out there's a lot of different things that we call science, political science, for example, that are more art than science, perhaps. But it is a difficult thing figuring out because they're all important in their own way in the big conversation, but they don't get a lot of play.
Well, exactly. I think that what happens is that there's been, maybe I'm thinking in too broad a sense for some, but years ago we started very much focusing on the concept of STEM in education, science, technology, engineering, and math, and that was supposed to be what we're supposed to really do going forward. And there was a lack of focus on sort of the ideas about the humanities and social sciences. And I think this is really a time in which we really have to recognize that while science is very important, medicine is very important, a lot of other disciplines have a lot to contribute. When you think about the fact that, for example, communications may help us understand how we should learn about this. I just noticed last night a new ad, which I thought was clever about the coronavirus, that a lot of the communication outside the news is ads by Amazon or by a pizza chain that talks about hands-free delivery and things like that. But I think we're missing a little bit of the opportunity to use other disciplines, for example, psychology, who can help people deal with the pressures of threatened illness or job loss or isolation. Even the point that people who are reliant on meeting with therapists or social workers can't really do it at this point. So they're under increased stress. Anthropologists and historians can give us an insight into how other cultures look at this situation besides just the death count in other countries, and also can talk about the history in a way that maybe scientists are a little less familiar about. Not that scientists are lacking in terms of their importance. I think, though, that there are many other disciplines that can add much to this conversation.
And although I'm not going to have a long philosophical discussion, you do suggest maybe we ought to think about philosophy and ethics. And I think of that in the context of, for example, the issue of how many people who contract the coronavirus and find it fatal are over a certain age. Most of the victims are over the age of 80. Many of them are over the age of 90. In addition to that, most of those who die have pre-existing conditions, some of which may have resulted from their own choice in lifestyle. This is not to explain, but the point is, from an ethical standpoint, doctors make the decision all the time who needs to get the treatment, and sometimes we are in what, let's call it triage if you wish, but somehow there has to be a discussion of those issues before us, because not every life can be saved. As a matter of fact, we're all going to die at some point. So this, it seems to me, is one of the key issues. It's a lot easier to address it politically, say every life is precious, but they're not all precious to the same degree, I think. I know that sounds pretty harsh, but it just seems to me that that's a fact of life.
Well, I have an outdoor basketball court at my home, and a couple of fellows my age have gravitated to want to go over there and shoot. I actually am avoiding that. But, I hear the conversation, or I engage in a conversation from a distance with them about this idea about, well, we ought to just open up the world and people should go out, and maybe some people are going to die, and maybe we should do what we can to help the elderly, but they should be segregated off and provided with whatever we can. Those conversations, I think, happen more often than we think. I also think, though, that the point that I raised in my notes to you, and you just sort of briefly mentioned, about the role of philosophers and ethicists. I mean, the pandemic's going to provide literally decades of material for scholars to be able to discuss about what was the right and the wrong decision, and why should we have made the decisions we made. I'd kind of like to hear more from them today while this situation is ongoing, because it would inform the debate, it would inform those decisions, rather than simply be after the fact sort of ruminations about right and wrong. I think that while I want to be careful about this, I think that I kind of question, when was the last time we saw a religious leader providing any insight into this series of moral questions about the pandemic? We want to make sure that people have different perspectives. I know that many religious organizations are now offering, for example, Zoom services where you can go and participate in a mass or in a synagogue worship service. But I don't see much discussion about having traditional sermons where basically a religious person would talk about, well, what does our religious faith tell us about what we should do? Not everyone wants to hear that. Not everyone is going to participate in that. But I don't see much in the way of that happening. And I think that the more channels of, I'm going to say, communication, the more disciplines that are involved, the better we are. I'm not really arguing that science is not the dominant factor in terms of how we need to be informed, but just getting the daily death count is, while stunning, is not really solving the problem. And I think we have to make sure that we remember that perhaps some type of new Manhattan Project would be in order to bring all these disciplines, like we see on the media, these town halls. We can't fit every discipline on the stage at the same time, but over a course of a week, you could have 5 different town halls, and they could be dealing with different issues. And that might add to the whole understanding about what's transpiring.
I've kind of gotten stuck on the idea. I wonder if I can't imagine President Donald Trump, we're with President Joe Biden, having a philosophy czar, but who knows, maybe something like that would be in the offing. I can't, anyway, as you say, though, science is important, but it's not the only discipline, right? I mean, that's kind of the bottom line.
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that I would say is that all disciplines probably have some contribution to make, that you can't forget about the importance of science, but at the same time, we need to add to it. There are a lot of smart people with a lot of experience and a lot of understanding that can add much to this conversation. And things like compassion and ethics and sort of the politics of understanding what the Constitution actually means in terms of not just what most people say, but protecting the rights of others. is sort of a predominant feature of our political culture. And I think that needs to be better understood, particularly by people who are trying to understand what's going on. You know, the people that are going to Michigan with long rifles and seeking to challenge the authority and maybe even raise the specter of intimidation against the governor there, they're not really processing, I don't believe, the notion about how societies ought to operate and what the role of government can and should be. And I think that it may be very hard to reach those strongest in the terms of aggression towards government power, but at the same time, there are a lot of people, and the polls show this, that most people favor continuation of sheltering. The most recent ABC IPES poll had that, for Democrats, 92% were in favor, although only for Republicans it was much less so. There was a significant difference between whites and non-whites in our society. And the idea is that just because most people are for one particular point of view, even the issue about at what point do we have to still protect rights is a central question that scientists are never going to address. That's not in their bailiwick. But people like in political science or in philosophy, it's more within their bailiwick, and I think they can add much to the conversation.
Dr. William Rosenberg. Bill, thanks as always.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Dr. William Rosenberg, professor of political science at Drexel University. Some thoughts on where we are in this pandemic, and tweeting at DR, as in Dr. B. Rosenberg, Rosenberg.